Hey, it's Brett, and this is Brett and Some Books. Today we're continuing The Plot to Seize the White House by Jules Archer. This is chapter 3 of part 2. The ailing captain was shipped to a navy hospital at Cavite, from which he was invalidated home to San Francisco. Arriving December 31st, 1900, he was embraced at the port by his worried father and mother, who had rushed to the West Coast to meet him. But during his convalescence, he had gained 30 pounds and was almost fully recovered. He returned home with his parents resplendent in his dress blues and two new decorations, a Marine Corps Brevet Medal for, quote, eminent and conspicuous personal bravery, end quote, and a China Campaign Medal. The town of Westchester gave him a hero's reception attended by the Secretary of the Navy and the Commandant of the Marine Corps. It was a heady tribute for a boy not yet 20. His parents now suggested that since his enlistment period was about up, and he had done more than his duty in serving his country, he might want to return to his Quaker heritage and civilian life. As a boy, he had sometimes discussed being a civil engineer. Um, why not go to college and study for it? He found himself powerless to explain why he felt bound to the Blue Brotherhood, to make his parents understand this deep pride in the Corps, the warm bonds of solidarity that united Marines, the enjoyable excitement of danger, the honor of being foremost in defense of the nation and its citizens. Any other way of life seemed pale and drab by comparison. "I'm re-enlisting," he told them. On October 31st, 1902, he was put in command of a company of 101 men and shipped to the island of Calabria. Sorry, just trying to find good lighting here. Okay. 20. He was shipped to the island of Culebra, 20 miles east of Puerto Rico. There was trouble in Panama, and Butler's company was part of two battalions being stationed in reserve on Culebra, while the fleet under Admiral George Dewey conducted maneuvers offshore. Living on field rations and fighting scorpions, centipedes, and tarantulas, the Marines built docks and other naval constructions. In the midst of their perspiring labors, Squadron Admiral Joe Coughlin sent 125 Navy gunnery experts ashore to challenge Butler and his men to a race in dragging 5-inch coastal guns up 400-foot hills. Admiral Dewey sent word that a victory shot was to be fired from the first gun mounted. Stripped to the waist, Butler worked like a madman alongside his men to prove the superiority of leathernecks over bluejackets. At sunrise, a jubilant Butler ordered his men to fire a victory shot. The shell sailed over Admiral Dewey's flagship, landing a mile beyond. Instead of congratulating the winners, the furious hero of Manila Bay sent Butler an icy reprimand for, quote, reckless firing, end quote. Their reward was an order to dig a canal. The work was backbreaking, with the ground solid rock in many places, marshland in others, all tenaciously guarded by a ferocious mosquito army, and the Navy insisted that they had to work under the boiling tropic sun in full uniform with leggings. Unwilling to inflict any ordeal upon his men that he was not willing to endure himself, Butler wielded a shovel in the ditch beside them. Soon their ranks began to be decimated by tropical fever. A Marine major asked the Navy flagship, which had an ice machine aboard, for ice to bring down their fevers. His request scornfully refused, he returned to camp to find Butler unconscious. The major ordered him rowed immediately across the bay to a temporary Navy hospital. Indignant at the Navy's treatment, the major wrote to Butler's father in Washington to tell him what had happened at Culebra. Thomas Butler let out an angry roar in the White House Naval Affairs Committee. Secretary of the Navy William H. Moody sent swift orders to Admiral Dewey that no more Americans were to be used as forced labor on the miserable canal. The Navy brass fumed, convinced that it had been Captain Smedley Butler who had complained to his father. "You're okay." As soon as he was off the sick list and Admiral Coughlin put him in charge of 65 natives hired to finish the canal. 2 weeks later, the canal finished, he collapsed with a relapse of tropical fever. While Butler was in the hospital, a belated award of the Philippine Campaign Medal made him think about his old battalion under Major Waller, who was now back in the Philippines under Army General Adnan Chaffee, fighting rebels. He was stunned when an uproar in the American press compelled Waller's court-martial for killing 10 Filipino native carriers who had balked at orders during a march. Waller had been acquitted, however, on grounds that he had merely been obeying, quote, "kill and burn," end quote, orders relayed from General Chaffee. Butler was distressed by the news. Having served under both Waller and Chaffee, he admired them as courageous officers, whose code called for protecting first American civilians wherever they might be, then the men under them, then their comrades in arms. From his own experience in the Philippines and China, Butler guessed that Waller had suspected the carriers of being rebels. It was impossible to tell apart insurrectionists and non-combatant natives. The 21-year-old Marine captain was not yet troubled by doubts as to what the Marines were ordered to do in the service of their country, or why. He shared the easy condescension of most Marines of that swashbuckling era toward people of underdeveloped countries as naive natives who had to be patronized, directed, and protected by Americans. The Marines were an elite gendarmerie entrusted with the duty of maintaining international law and order on behalf of civilization. A Marine's only concern when carrying out his orders as expertly as possible, without questions. It was only later, as he gradually became to know native peoples better and learned to admire their age-old customs and traditions, that Smedley Butler felt impelled to question his role as an instrument of American foreign policy.